And I'm going to record this. So if you shouldn't be here, if you've told somebody you're doing something else, you feel free. Maybe now's the time to turn your camera off. Um, yeah. Okay, let's begin. Hello, everyone. Absolutely lovely. Thank you so much for coming along and giving me a little bit of your time. If you need to go at some stage, I think we're going to be just a little over half an hour here. But if you need to jump off or anything, feel free to do that. I'm recording all of this, so it's going to get sent out to your email anyway. Um, but first, maybe I should introduce myself a little bit. So my name is Conor Crichton, and I write books, and I also do a lot of coaching work. And you've maybe, I don't know, maybe you've come here through my Instagram stuff, or maybe through a book, or through a link or something like that. But I always feel I don't have a huge amount of qualifications for the work I do, but I do feel that the majority of my training came from working in bars. I think probably the longest kind of concurrent or reasonable sort of career I ever had was a bartender. Worked for most of my life in bars all over the world. And I actually think that's where most of my coaching began. I think I first got introduced to trauma and the effects of it, and in particular in Irish people, when dealing with drunk people or emotionally overwhelmed people in pubs. Um, And so I've been working as a coach for like the last 12 years or so. And this is sort of where I've come to this theme of Irishness. I've been working as a coach um, with people from all over the world. I was based in Berlin for over 10 years and worked with a lot of German people too, and people from all over. I lived in California for a while and worked with North Americans. Um, and always had a big bunch of Irish people, Irish clients. And what I began to notice is that with my Irish clients, when they would come in the first session, almost within the first 10 minutes, I could kind of predict what their issues would be. It was very interesting. Like say someone would come to me from, I don't know, from France or Spain or something like that. I wasn't always sure. But with Irish people, in like the first few minutes of any of our conversations, I would always get a sense of like, I know what's wrong. I know what the problem is. And so this is where I kind of began to become like a little bit focused on this. I was like, isn't it interesting how we share so much? How we we have these sort of tendencies, these issues, these patterns that keep repeating in us. And yet, all the people that I would speak to over and over again felt completely isolated with their shit. They were going through their own experience and they would feel like, oh God, it's just me. But what I noticed in speaking to a lot of Irish people is that we share so much. And the areas that we share are all connected to three main things. One is boundaries, the other is guilt, and the third is just emotional repression. So, over and over again in my work as a coach, I meet Irish people who have huge problems, of like tremendous suffering in their life, tremendous kind of misery in their life. Like it really is misery, um, trapped in these situations where if they knew how to operate with boundaries, and boundaries are basically just saying no, giving people directions as to how you want to be treated. And if they were able to kind of navigate guilt for most of us is actually just a delusion. Guilt is a kind of a piece of brainwashing. And if they were able to just express themselves emotionally, if they were able to say, I don't feel good, I feel pain, I feel sad. So these three areas, I began to look at these three areas and thought, wow, these are things that almost all Irish people present with. at least when they were coming to me for coaching sessions. And I noticed them in myself too. Like I've lived, I'm 45 now, and I'd say I've lived like about 18 years not in Ireland. And it's very interesting when you don't live in Ireland and you come up across other cultures and nationalities and you end up in relationships with people from different countries and you run up against their conditioning and things are very, very different. And you start to notice how different you are. And I noticed it myself. I noticed, say, for example, how difficult the difficulty that I had with boundaries. I remember being in a relationship when I first moved to Berlin with a German woman and having such a difficult time saying no that I ended up taking a job in Afghanistan for 2 months just to get away and avoid saying no. The lengths we go to. And I know so many people who come to me and have these huge stories about the distance they'll go to just to avoid saying no because it's so difficult to set this boundary. I remember another situation, and this actually, I'm embarrassed to say, didn't happen that long ago. It was about 4 years ago, where I was driving and I got rear-ended, and the first thing I got out and did was sort of apologize to the person who rear-ended me, and then found myself almost looking at the way I had to kind of. It was only that I was with someone at the time who said like you did nothing wrong there. But I began to go into this place of did I do something wrong here? Was I driving too slow? And so on and so forth. Um, and these things happen. I remember as well, like just a little over 2 years ago, my dad died, and at his funeral, I kind of had the job of being at the coffin. It was an open casket, and I sort of stood at the coffin. And my mom was at the door, and she'd greet people, and I was just at the coffin. And as people came up and they had their moment with him, they'd sort of shake my hand. And in all of those little moments, when people were just about to have a deep emotional moment, maybe they would cry, maybe they would express something. They'd pull themselves away and say, "Oh, sorry, sorry, sorry," and walk away from me and my dead father's body lying beside me. So, in all these ways, you can see how these familiar things kind of wrap us all together. And maybe as you're listening to this, you might kind of begin to notice that none of these things feel particularly new to you. When I talk about this idea, the absence of boundaries, the guilt that kind of always clings to us, or our emotional repression, just our inability to express sometimes, how these things are so familiar. And what I've discovered and what all my work at the moment is all about is this idea that Irish people, we suffer individually, but our conditioning is collective. So when I talk about Irishness, I'm not trying to blame Irish people. I'm not trying to say that there's anything wrong with us, but I'm trying to say that there's an element of our conditioning which is preventing us from living the beautiful, happy lives that are our birthright. Like it's so difficult for so many Irish people to connect to the feeling of joy, to connect to just the pure bliss of moving through life. And what happens is we end up feeling isolated with our issues. We end up feeling lonely. We end up feeling unlovable. But what I've discovered through just looking at my own shit and doing this work is that we are united in all of this. And if we could begin to explore it and open up to it and heal from it, I think that like our pathway to true happiness and true authenticity is really not that far away. So I want to just read to you a list. And it's just some of the features of Irish conditioning. And as you're listening to this list, if you have a pen and paper or not, you can just do this mentally. You can do it with an imaginative pen and paper. Irish people, we have a magical capacity like that. You can just pretend that you have a pen and paper. I'd love you just to tick them as they come along and see how you do. You could call it Irish conditioning bingo, if you like. But I'm going to read this little list out here. Uh, and it starts with some of the sillier things. You know, we we have this tendency to apologize when someone else bumps into us. You know, we can do these things. We can walk into an empty room and say sorry, feeling that we've disturbed someone. Then we do these things where we sometimes we'd rather die than make a scene. You know, I had a client who was telling me about how they were at a concert and they had a cough and they were so scared of letting the cough out that they actually asphyxiated and then had to be carried out of the concert hall rather than just release this cough. Do you know what I mean? We have this habit of avoiding directness. We're great hinters. You know what I mean? There's something very disempowering about how we try and get our needs met. We like to just, it's very interesting. I adopted a couple of dogs this summer and they can't communicate with me. So they try and give me directions with their eyes, please understand my needs. We do this too. We're so afraid of asking for things. And this is one of the first things that I noticed when I lived in Germany, how German people would just ask, hey, can you do this thing for me? Would you mind doing this thing for me? And I found it rude. I couldn't believe that they could just speak that way. And speaking of that, there's a kind of we don't have any of this directness. We're terrified of directness. We think it's harsh. The same thing with honesty. And this is a real difficult thing for us. We're afraid that we feel that honesty is aggressive. We do this thing where we always say I'm fine or I'm grand when we're actually collapsing. We hide our true feelings. We feel that there's something kind of embarrassing or shameful about expressing how we are. Another thing that we do is we can be suspicious of joy. You know, when we feel this lightness, when we feel this happiness in our body, there's a part of us that has been trained, that's been conditioned for so long to imagine, oh, when's the other shoe gonna drop? So we can't even fully enjoy our wins because a part of us is always waiting for something terrible or catastrophic to happen. Another thing, and this is why a lot of people come to me, is we think rest must be earned. We think everything must be earned. We think love must be earned. We think happiness must be earned. There's zero sense of entitlement to us. And so many of us, we imagine that this is a positive thing. But then what happens is we just work ourselves to the bone. We never feel that we have earned enough to actually take a rest, to actually be kind to ourselves, to do something loving for ourselves. And then on top of that, we interpret the people, the people who are who can take rests, the people who are kind of nice to themselves. We look at them as lazy, or we judge them. It's very interesting. Like in Ireland, when we say someone is laid back, it's often not a compliment, you know? In most other places, if you said, oh, someone's really laid back, it would mean like, they take life very easily. But for us, it can often mean you're avoiding things. You're lazy, you know? Um, we fear being seen as too much. We always prefer to be small. We'd rather not ask for something. We'd rather be the assistant. We'd rather be kind of in the back. We don't want our face out there. There's something we want to be small. We don't speak up. It's a fear of being exposed, we idolize suffering as a proof that we are good people. I speak to so many Irish people in my work who are burnt out, but Irish people are designed to burn out because we have such little sense of value. So we derive our sense of value from being complete martyrs, from really kind of overdoing it, from working so hard. This is our reputation, our global reputation in so many ways has always been that we're really hard workers. We work that hard because we can ignore our body. We can ignore our dreams. We can ignore our real desires and suffer. We are designed to suffer. Another thing, and speaking, and it's kind of connected to that, is we never feel entitled to great things. We feel that mediocre is our place, sort of somewhere in the middle, you know, like these talents that we have, these phenomenal innate talents that we're born with, these gifts that we're born with. We often don't pursue them because we just feel, well, I don't want to make a show of myself. I don't want to be too big. It's very interesting when you think about that. Who wouldn't want to be big? The greatest joy in life is to just expand to your full size, to be all that you could possibly be. But this thing about us that we don't want to be big just really implies that we are terrified of being seen. We are terrified of being exposed. And then in all that terror, there's another thing that happens to us is that we never really disconnect from our families. You know, maturity for us, maturity for a healthy human means that at one stage you begin to just develop your own individuality. You develop your own voice, your own path. But for so many of us, because of the way that we're reared, because of the lack of bonding that often happens between kids and their parents, because the kind of layers of shame that engulf us all, what happens is we don't fully disconnect from our parents. And so we continue to make choices up through middle life based on what mom or dad would like. And so we don't get to fully experience freedom. So these are just some of the things. These are just some of the things that I have noticed from working with Irish people, and some of the things that I feel unite us all. There's a whole lot more, but it's this idea. The problem with all of this is that we just don't get to a place where we feel like we are really ourselves. And so more often than not, I end up in conversations with people who just don't really know themselves. They don't know how they got there. But all they know is that there's some pain in their body and the doctors can't diagnose what it's from. Or they're not happy, or they're not sleeping at night, or they just feel deeply uncomfortable. And all of these things, all of these factors, the discomfort, the sadness, the depression, whatever it is that's coming up, they're all signs that you're not listening to your true self, that you're not stepping into your authenticity. It's almost impossible for Irish people to be truly authentic because of this conditioning, because of Irishness and how we are designed not to be ourselves, not to follow our dreams, but to be always highly self-aware of how other people see us. We are kind of in this prison of self-consciousness, and it prohibits us from really expressing. We are numb and repressed, and that's where all the sadness comes from. So that was a mouthful. I hope you're still holding on there. So I've created this course, and this is what this class is all about. I've created a course, and the course is all about how you can begin to just move through your Irishness, how you can begin to transform it, how you can kind of alchemize it. You know, alchemy is this old art of turning metal into gold. So much of our Irishness is complete junk. It's like rusty old machinery. It's a kind of a meanness, and the meanness is towards ourselves. But there is an essential Irishness. You know what I mean? Essential Irishness. It could be an aftershave, couldn't it? But there is this deep essential Irishness, right? Which is our true nature. It's our true nature which was there before all the conditioning was put on top of you, before the school, before your family, before everything started to point you in different directions. And when you can connect to that, that's your compass for the rest of your life. And that's how you really find true happiness. So the way the course works is this. It's a bunch of videos and a bunch of lessons, and then a community where people can kind of come and talk about what's going on. And you can do the course at any time. It's sort of the recordings are all up there, and you can just go through it at your own pace. Um, you're probably going to have to like the sound of my voice because that's everywhere. And there's a bunch of like guided meditations too, which are all about like these sort of meditations that you'll do at nighttime or in the morning. And they kind of help to like deprogram your Irishness. It's like they brainwash you into a place of just authenticity. And how it all works is that the first part of the course is you just begin to see your Irishness. Like as I sort of said to you there, as I was reading out that list, there's just certain things. And maybe you go, oh shit, that's me. I recognize that. You begin to see this. You begin to see, I know for so much of my life, I didn't see my issues as Irishness. I just thought, oh God, I'm so screwed up. Why am I so miserable? What's wrong with me? But as I began to kind of explore this, I saw, oh no, hold on, this isn't just me. It's kind of all of us. And as you begin to see this, as you begin to see that what you're experiencing doesn't make you alone in your problems, it actually connects you to a kind of a greater collective movement. This really begins to shake or to loosen its grip on you. The problem with our perception of ourselves is that we feel it's shameful to be the way we are. But it's amazing when you realize that most people feel that way too. It's not really that shameful anymore. It's an opportunity. Then the next part is we just begin to feel all the unfelt things. So yourself probably haven't really felt all the sadness of pushing your emotions down. You know, maybe you probably haven't really felt all the moments where, as a teenager or as a young person, you decided to make a choice that kind of abandoned your dreams. You made that choice kind of, what will people think? Or this is the sensible thing to do, rather than following your dreams. So the next part is we have to feel all of that. You have to kind of let that be felt. And then we begin to take acts of rebellion. So a big part of this course is rebelling against Irishness. You begin to see, oh, there's a part of me saying, I could never sing karaoke. There's a voice in your head that's saying, oh, I could never sing karaoke. I couldn't do it. So you begin to rebel. You go, well, maybe I want to. Maybe I could. There's a voice in your head that says, oh, you could never start your own business. So the next part of that is we begin to rebel. You start your own business. You start to get the ball rolling. There's a voice in your head that says, oh, I could never leave my husband. Well, maybe now it's to begin to realize, the reason I can't leave my husband is because I have this Irish conditioning that says I have to stick with the misery till the end of my days. And in this way, we begin to slowly rebel. And then the last part of the course is we reclaim our joy. I feel like nobody deserves joy more than Irish people. We've had so much shame, so much guilt, so much repression of expression, so much hiding beneath these damp gray shawls of low value and no self-esteem. And the thing we deserve most, the thing that really kind of shakes loose all of this ancient conditioning, is by just connecting to joy. Your happiness is the medicine. It really is. Your happiness and your love is the medicine. Yeah, so what did I want to say? I almost didn't make this course. And the reason I didn't make this course is because I'm from I'm from the south. I grew up in Kildare. My mom is from Kildare too. My dad's from the north. He's from Ballymena. He grew up in a Protestant working class neighborhood and but lived most of his adult life down south. But I always felt a little bit like I'm not really Irish. Do you know, I kind of have a bit of a dark secret with my Irishness. I'm not fully Irish. You know, I grew up with a dad who didn't speak the language. He kind of was more into rugby and Gaelic games, you know, he sort of wouldn't have really, you know, was into like, would say scones instead of scones. Do you know what I mean? Things like this. It was a strange background for me, but I always felt like I can't really do this. And that was actually my Irishness just sneaking in to try and prevent me from doing something big, to try and prevent me from exposing myself, to try and prevent me from doing something that would actually expand me. So the reason I also made this course was to rebel against that little bit of Irish conditioning in my head that was saying, hey, stay small, stay quiet, don't do anything. So my hope for you is that if you do this course, that you will also land upon the thing that you really, really were meant to do. You will connect to your dreams. You will connect to the part of you that was there before all those voices, all those messages were drilled into you. And in this way, you'll heal yourself from Irishness. And I feel as well, you know, there's been so many, there's been so much work in Ireland. You know, there's been so much efforts towards freedom. You know, historically, there's been so many rebellions, so much politics, and all of this happening. But so much of the occupational forces and the negative forces of Irish history are actually inside ourselves. They're written into our DNA. They're in our genes. We carry the mark of empire inside our bodies. You know what I mean? Like you can talk about this whole idea of getting the Brits out and so on and so forth, but what if they're actually inside of you? What if they're in your genes? So this whole course, I feel, presents this amazing opportunity for us to actually find freedom at an individual level. And that freedom isn't something about patriotism or anything like that. It's just your individual capacity to express yourself, be yourself, to love and feel joy and know happiness. Um, so that's it. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you so much for listening. I'm going to just say, I'm going to put this in the chat 1 second. Um, sorry, that 1 sec. Um, so, um, so the course is called Healing from Irishness. You can get it at my website. My website is called conorcrichton.com. The price is €132, but I put a code there, and if you use that code by the end of this week, you'll get 25% off the course. And if anybody has any questions, you can you can write me, or you can ask me now. But that's it. Um, thank you very much. I'm going to stop the recording now. But if anybody has any questions or anything you'd like to ask about the course, please do.